Welcome to another episode of Hiring and Empowering Solutions. My name is Molly McGrath, and I am the creator of this office altering podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. As always, you can check us out at hiringandempowering.com. Oh my gosh, we are in for such an amazing treat today. I feel honored. And it's not often that I get butterflies when I have a guest here to interview, but today we have a legend. We have David Neagle here, and I'm so excited. I'm going to give you the brief introduction for David, but then I'm going to give my introduction as well. So many of our listeners have probably been exposed to David, worked with him, coached with him, podcasts, been to events, been through how to manage, what have you. But for those of you that have not, David is a founder of a multi-million-dollar global coaching company, Life Is Now. And if you know his backstory, this is more than extraordinary. He's also the host of the Business News Daily Ranked podcast, The Successful Mind. He's dropped 462 episodes as of this recording. And his mission is to teach people to think successfully so they can experience personal freedom. Being in the coaching and mentorship industry for more than 20 years, David has helped lead thousands of students from across, and I love that you use that word, students from across the globe, and is one of the architects of the personal growth industry. So let me tell you how I know David, and I'm so excited to share this. So when I first kind of stumbled across podcasting, when people weren't really podcasting, so to speak, I found the Successful Mind podcast and listened to, I believe it was the 8 Steps of Financial Freedom. I was hook, line, sinker. And then you talked about having the Art of Success program, 3-day program in Chicago. And I called my partners, Lainey and Roz, who many of our listeners have worked with. And the three of us hopped on a plane. We went to your event. Oh my goodness. We post on on Facebook, like everybody has to come to this event. And then our friend Victoria, who was also my partner at Lawyers with Purpose, our industry here, David, Victoria's a legend. I mean, everybody knows Victoria Collier, and Victoria and I talk all the time. We're the best of buds. And I said to her last week, Victoria, like what is the one thing that you would attribute to your success and where you're at right now? Selling your practice, starting your CBD farm, starting your coaching program, helping people buy and sell. She said, absolutely, hands down, David Neagle. David was Victoria's personal coach. And so I am so excited. It's been, 5 years since the Art of Success I went to in Chicago. I was telling David, when I was doing research, I saw there's one in Atlanta in April, and I'm going to be there. And so for my listeners, my friends, if you want to come and hang out with me and go to an amazing 3-day event for nothing, I mean, so incredibly cheap, and join me in Atlanta, then I'm going to drop the link in the show notes for you to register and how to register for David's event. But I'm going to be at the Art of Success Summit, and I'm saying it on camera here. I'm saying it on my podcast, and I want all of you to be there with me. So David, thank you for being our guest. I'm so excited.
It's my pleasure. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's so many topics we could talk about, probably for a week solid, that and you obviously came with 462 episodes. When I was doing research, I was thinking, what do I want David to really talk about to just get in everybody's bones? And what came up for me is there's always a way. And that's something I hear you say over and over and over again. I'm definitely a groupie of your podcast. And when I was researching this morning, lo and behold, episode 461 is titled, There Is Always a Way. For the listeners, after you listen to this, please go back and listen to episode 461. David, talk to us about, this statement I've heard you say over and over again. There's always a way.
Yeah, well, there is. And, the funny thing about that was that I stumbled onto that from an experience. let me just give a little brief background to explain what happened to me. I was a high school dropout. I got married young, had 2 children, and I was only qualified for basically 2 things: to drive a truck and to drive a forklift. So I was making $20,000 a year, but it took me 6.5 days a week to do it. And my wife was working also as a hostess at a restaurant, and we were still on food stamps. We were having a hell of a time. Our car got repossessed. We filed bankruptcy. We had to leave our apartment in the middle of the night because we couldn't afford to pay for it. And we had to move like 60 miles away into a less than desirable neighborhood in order to make ends meet. They still wasn't meeting. And I realized that I had made poor decisions. I came to the place where I owned that. But I was looking for, how do I change it? How do I change my situation? And, this is in the late 80s, the early 90s. So the idea was, well, I have to go back to school. I'm going to have to go to college. I'm going to have to get an education. And then I'm going to have to build a career. But the problem was I had no time and no money. I did not have the time to go. There was no way to lower our standard of living any more than it was. It was already at the bottom. We were barely making it. And I was getting more and more frustrated. My mind was, how do I make more money? So what I didn't realize was that my mind was focused in the wrong place. I saw money as the problem. I saw the decisions that I made as getting me to that problem, but the problem I thought that I had to fix was the money. So I spent 2 intensive years doing everything that I could to change the financial situation. I managed to put a little bit of money together. I bought an old Blazer truck with a snowplow on it. Lived in Chicago. I would plow snow, in the middle of the night when I would get home from work until the morning, barely get any sleep, go back to work again, just to make extra money. And it was not working. On top of it, I had a terrible attitude. I hated what I did. I was extremely angry at myself, and I had a bad attitude at work. So I was getting reprimanded for it on a regular basis. And my quality of work was not good either. I didn't really care about the quality because I was suffering from entitlement. And, my idea was I just wanted to work to go home. I didn't care about actually, was I doing a good job? So one day I came in, I was very exhausted. I think I had a bad cold on top of it. It was February. It was like 20 below in Chicago. It's night, working on a dock. And I got reprimanded severely twice before I even started my shift. So I was just totally enraged in my mind. And through the night, things just kept going wrong. One thing after another. And I was in the back of this trailer on this forklift, and I just broke down sobbing. And I was like, God, please show me some way to get out of this. I don't know what to do. I'll do anything. Give me some kind of a sign. I have no idea what to do. And this voice in my head said, David, change your attitude. And it was the weirdest thing. It almost sounded like it was somebody else standing in this trailer with me. So long story short, I began to really think about what I was hearing. And I thought, could there be anything to that? Could I be looking in the wrong place? If I change my attitude, how is it going to change my income? And I really didn't know what an attitude was. And so I didn't know how to change it. So I started thinking to myself, okay, if I was going to look at somebody that had a good attitude, who would that be? Well, the guy that owned the company that I worked for it was a pretty historical story with this guy, because he had the largest international food distribution company in the United States. And he started it in his garage. Like almost, I don't know about now, but then almost all the foods that we got internationally came through this company. So I noticed some things about him that were very different than the paradigm that I was raised. For instance, I was raised that wealthy people, successful people are basically jerks, and this guy was not a jerk. When he would walk through the warehouse with other people to come to see how he automated this enormous warehouse, because it was state of the art at the time, he would never walk past an employee without stopping, shaking their hand, asking them how they were doing. Probably 80% of that warehouse didn't even speak English. And he would always be kind. And this was a different experience from what I had heard. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna notice the three things about him, and then I'm gonna change those things in myself. So what I noticed was he must have loved what he did because he was successful and he stuck with it from starting it in his garage. Number two, he treated everybody with total respect. And number three, he must have done a great job in order to build this enormous company. And I realized I hated what I did. I was constantly bitching at people. I was not being nice because I was just so angry at myself and the world. And I definitely was not doing a great job. So I said, I'm going to change those three things and I'll give myself a year and see if that makes any difference whatsoever. And at the same time, there's a voice in my head going, David, two things. Number one, you've never stuck to anything in your life. Number two, there's no way this could possibly make a difference. So I'm like, nope, this is the voice I heard. This is what I'm going to stick to. Within 30 days, my income tripled. It literally tripled. I went from 20,000 a year to 62,000 a year in 30 days. And what was even stranger was that the opportunity to triple my income had been around me for 2 years and I couldn't see it because I was so negative about life. It never dawned on me that this thing that was around me was actually an opportunity. I only began to see it as an opportunity as my attitude changed. But I didn't even put that together until I started studying. So this intrigued me so much. I wanted to know, is it really possible that my attitude changed this result in my life? So I was like, somebody has to know. Everybody around me said I got lucky. And they're like, stick with it. You got lucky. You got a break. You're never going to get a break again. You know, that type of thing. But nobody could tell me what really happened. So I was convinced it was something else. And I started to study. I would go to the library. I would get biographies. I would start reading those. And then finally, I stumbled across like Tony Robbins and stuff like that. And I used to have to drive 100 miles to work one way. So what I did was I got all the music out of my car and I started getting books on tape and seminars on tape and lectures on tape and everything I could get my hands on. And I began to study. And over a period of 7 years, I not only learned what I did, but I learned a tremendous amount about human psychology and achievement and the progression of human beings through time and like history, all kinds of stuff. I was getting an education. I was basically getting a college education in my car every day. So on the side, people were coming up to me and asking me for advice because then I went to work for this other company where I tripled my income, but I still started out as a truck driver. But within 7 years, I went to the top of the company and I was in charge of expanding that company across the country. So people were constantly coming up to me, usually in private, very hush hush, like, what are you doing? Like, what's going on? And the people that would listen to what I told them, they would have success. So in 1999, I got an opportunity to become a facilitator for somebody, teaching somebody else's seminars. And I walked away from my job, and I said I was going to do this full time. And I've been doing that now this will be 23 years. I don't facilitate that person's stuff anymore. That only lasted a couple of years, but I immediately went into doing what I was doing. But here's what this taught me. It taught me that everything is already here. The problem is that we generally can't see it because our mind is very focused on the direction that our belief system is telling it to notice in life. And I first picked this up because that was one of the questions that was in my head. I was reading Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, and in the introduction, there's something called the sly disguises of opportunity, and it's just a little paragraph. And he says that generally people miss opportunity because it comes to them disguised. They see it as misfortune or temporary defeat. And because they see it that way, they actually don't see it as opportunity. He says, perhaps this is why so many people miss opportunity. And when I saw that, I was like, that was exactly my problem. I saw this opportunity as something I wanted nothing to do with. And yet it was the opportunity that instantly took me out of the problem that I had. And I was also focused on the money instead of focused on what was actually causing the problem, which was me. I was never taught that I was the one that was responsible for the results that I was getting. I was not really taught that in life. I heard it, but it wasn't something that anybody made me follow up with in behavior as I was being raised as a child. So when I began to learn that, I realized that there's a law that there's 7 basic laws that govern everything in the universe. They exist both in science and religion, and they exist in how we think. And one of those laws is the law of polarity. And the law of polarity states that everything in the universe has an opposite side, and it's equal and opposite. And not only does it have an opposite side, but you can't have anything with an opposite side that's not connected. So I became very fascinated with these laws, and I began to study them and practice them and really put them to the test. And what I learned was this: when you have a need or a desire for something, you're going to experience whether or not that is actually in your life. And for most people, they look at it and go, there's nothing here. I don't have the money. I don't have the resources. I don't have the employees. I don't have whatever. But the truth is that all the things that you say you don't have are actually there in your life at the same time, but you don't see them as opportunities. You see them as either something that you have to sacrifice in order to get that you don't want to sacrifice, or you think is wrong or bad or detrimental to you, or you don't see it as an opportunity at all. But the fact is that it's actually there, and that's including money. So every time I was like, I am going to learn to think according to this law, so that everything that I believe that I don't have is there. And I'm going to start changing my perception to actually train my mind to see what I'm not currently seeing. And when I did that, I rose extremely fast in my company. I became a millionaire in a very short period of time. And I started with nothing. When I first started, it was like, well, who am I going to sell into a seminar? But the problem is that there's people everywhere. The real issue is that you don't want to ask them. You don't want to ask them to buy. You don't want to learn the skill of having a conversation or having a sales conversation. So one of the things that I do with people, and I work with primarily business owners and entrepreneurs, is get them to realize that the problems that they're having are directly being caused by how they're thinking, and how their thinking is being caused by their belief system, and that's controlling their perception. So the problems that they think that they have that they can't overcome, the answer is actually right there, but they have to train themselves to see it. So through that, and then strategic advice that me and my company give them, we're able to turn their businesses around virtually overnight, as long as they follow what it is and they study. A person has to actually train themselves to see the fact that the answer, the opportunity, the result, the goal, the ambition, whatever it is that you want, it's already here, and it literally is waiting to come into your life. But you have to be able to recognize it and then know what to do with it when you recognize it. So there's always a way, because you can't have a need or a desire or a problem without a solution, an answer, or the way being there at the same time.
Wow. I mean, talk about an example of there's always a way. And David, you've worked with many attorneys, for 25 years, I've worked with attorneys, and these are the words they say in law school, they are trained skeptics, believe nothing. There's no harder industry in the world in regards to talk about a shitty attitude. I mean, they're trained to have a shitty attitude. They're trained to absolutely believe freaking nothing. And I mean, and you've worked with many of my near dear friends that will say the greatest thing that ever happened to them was working with you. And this is my battle every single day. You use the example of employees, not enough money, not enough, lack. Couple that with believing nothing. Couple that with you're trained and conditioned to consistently challenge and debate and defend. And, I always say to attorneys, this is what they tell me some days: imagine waking up out of bed every day with just like all your weapons in full force. Like you just expect to fight every single day and defend and believe nothing. I'm like, that sounds absolutely horrible.
Right. Well, listen, so check this out. So when I first started working with Arjan, first off, he had lost everything because his wife, Allie, had suffered a terrible illness and his whole business collapsed. He didn't have any money. But once he started to get going again, the idea was that we ran into a problem with attorneys. Attorneys could not hear the message the way either Arjan was talking about it or the way that I was talking about it. So I sat down with Arjan and I said, we've got to figure out a way to trick them so that they can actually hear the message, because they're programmed not to hear it. They're programmed to think this can't work, this can't be true, this is wrong. And we all know that a person that graduates law school is probably a brilliant person, but they're also not trained how to run a business. Mm-hmm. So we had to work with tailoring a message and testing it for a year before we figured out the message that they would be able to hear. And once they could hear it, that was it. His business just took off after that.
What was the message that they could hear?
Well, the message that they were hearing was when Arjan would go to these, what were they called? He would go to these places where people would get extra educational credits that they had to.
CLEs.
CLE, that's what it was. CLE, yeah. Yep. So he would go there and he would talk about what he was doing. And what they were hearing was that they weren't good enough, or that there was something wrong with them, or that they weren't smart enough. It was almost like there was this idea that they picked up in law school and in college that they should already be smart enough to run a business. Like that should not even be a question in their mind. But running a business is unlike anything anybody's ever done if you've never been exposed to it. And especially if you come from any kind of a middle class, working class, or professional background, your mind basically has a middle class value system, and an entrepreneur, a business person's value system, is the polar opposite of that, right? It's all about profit and moving forward and helping people. The middle class is all about staying the same, being safe, don't taking any risks, and it proliferates through everything that we have in our experience from a child to an adult. So the idea was we had to change the message to get them to already believe that they were smart enough to do this. And here was a way to expand upon what they were doing. And we had to tailor it a bit, but once we did that, they could hear it as something that they wanted and not subconsciously reject it as, oh, you just don't think I'm smart enough to do this. The idea was, you're more than smart. You're brilliant. That's why you need to hear this, because it'll give you the advantage over everybody else that you're doing. So it played off their competitive side a little bit, and it played off their ego side a little bit, which is exactly what we needed for them to hear the message.
Brilliant. That is so spot on, because attorneys, entrepreneurs, right? What's the definition of an entrepreneur? I think it was Michael Gerber in the E-Myth says, anti-authoritarian complex. Don't you dare tell me what to do.
Yeah, that's right. We're anarchists at heart, really. I mean, that's kind of true. I know Michael Gerber a long time, and that's exactly correct.
So talk to us a little bit, knowing our audience here, our population, and how to get attorneys to really flip the switch and realize there's always a way. I think you and I were chatting before we even recorded today. My challenge in this insane employee-driven market right now, the employee's in the driver's seat for multiple reasons. And, COVID caused everyone to sit their ass on their couch and really do. And for people that are on a path of growth, they weren't watching Netflix. They were listening to your podcast. They were reading self-development books, just like you explained on your drive that you did every day, and taking stock of saying, all right, now that I'm not commuting to work every day, what am I doing? Like, what do I want? And really took stock of that. And now there's this I was in a Facebook group last night with a bunch of attorneys, and they're like, our workforce is screwed. Nobody wants to go back to work. Our whole world's going to hell in a handbucket. And I wrote something, then I walked away, then I wrote something, then I walked away. I'm like, okay. And I'm like, do I, don't I, do I, don't I? And like, this is not the problem. Your unrelenting standard mindset's the problem right now. Do we need to pull out a case study of Netflix versus Blockbuster? I mean, if you're not going to adapt and have this stinking thinking that everybody's lazy, my kids are 16 and 19. Both of them have a coach. They have both had a coach since they were in the 6th grade. There's nobody harder on them than they are on themselves. They're hardworking. And I'm like, don't don't bucket and generalize things. And they're saying these employees want all this money now. I'm not paying them. But on the flip side, they'll come out and say to me, I do recruiting, and they'll say to me, you can't find me anyone, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, first of all, you can't hand me crap and expect me to perform magic for you. Like, you don't want to pay them. You expect them to sit in the office and be chained to a desk. You don't invest in personal and professional development. You have no health insurance or benefits for them. But then you say you're stressed out and you're not making any money. Like, how do they get out of this vicious cycle? Because they don't want to hear it from me.
Yeah. So this is akin exactly to what Napoleon Hill pointed out in the introduction under sly disguises of opportunity. It's not that the opportunity is not there. It's there probably better than it's ever been, but it's disguised as something that they think that they don't want or they can't afford. Eric Hoffer said something. So everybody that listens to this, if you want to get a much better idea of what's happening right now, get Eric Hoffer's book, The True Believer. It will blow your mind.
I love that book.
Yeah, it's great. So anyway, Eric Hoffer said, in times of change, the learners will inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully equipped to deal with a world that no longer exists. And we're in a massive change. During this change, if you're willing to do things that other businesses aren't willing to do, not only can you get good employees, you can get the best. Because they're there, they want to work, but they also know that they are holding the golden ticket for themselves now. But because most people don't want to do that, you can find and source some of the best people, the best qualified people to move your business forward. And here's the crazy thing, because 2-3 years ago, everybody thought, well, let me get the best quality person for the least amount of money that I can pay them. Now that is completely changed. But when you don't hire someone, you don't realize it's costing you 10 times as much as if you would pay them at the top of the scale for what they can actually be paid right now. You're only hurting yourself by doing it. You'd have to look at a little strategy as to who you hire first. I agree with that. But it is like, if a person really wants to get a competitive advantage right now, the time couldn't be better to get a competitive advantage, because there's so much talent out there ready to go to the right opportunity for them.
Absolutely. Talk to us a little bit about, because this is what I hear. And you said this earlier when you were telling your backstory about this whole relationship with money and thinking that the problem is money and tying it into there's always a way.
Yeah. So this is what I tell my students, and I've said this on the podcast a million times. And very often, like if I'm in a large group of people, somebody hires me to speak someplace, and when I tell a group of people this, they look at me like I fell out of a tree or something, right? And I'll tell them, listen, first of all, you have to understand how to learn to think by truth. And for attorneys, there could be nothing better than to really understand first principles thinking, because if you understand that, you're ahead of everybody. You're ahead of your competition. You're ahead of the courts. You're ahead of people that you're defending or prosecuting. You're ahead of the opposite side of the people in a divorce. Whatever it is, you're ahead of them in how to think. Everybody is stuck in their only way of thinking, and they don't know how to think strategically around it, because they were never taught outside of what they believe to be true. So the idea is that everybody on the planet has exactly the same amount of money. From a resources perspective, this is absolutely true. Now, are they experiencing that? Well, the answer to that is no, they're not. But why aren't they experiencing it? There's 2 reasons. One, some people are ignorant to that truth. And if you're ignorant to that truth and you have been given a value system that's the antithesis of wealth and abundance, you live as if there is nothing for you, even if it's close to you. I mean, we know that most ghettos are actually very close to wealthy areas of town. If you're in like the United States, I'm not talking like a third world country, but in the United States, that's 100% true. Yet they don't see themselves as having the same opportunities as somebody that lives on the other side of the track, so to speak. The second reason is if a person is living in any kind of a country or a state or or an area where they're being oppressed by a totalitarian government or something like that, that is stifling the opportunity for them. But even then, the stories that I have heard over 30 years of people that have gotten out of those situations, right? Because they didn't want to settle for it anymore. They find a way out when they really want a way out. But the truth is that not only those opportunities, but that money, that resource is there for everybody if you understand how to think about it and how to find it. And those two things are skills. It's not something you're born with. It's not something that you have to have 160 IQ to understand. I've taught it to people that we would consider educationally challenged, and they become very wealthy because it's about being resourceful. It's not about being a great mathematician or being a brilliant Elon Musk. A person does not have to be that. This is a skill set about how to find the resources that you need. And that's all money is. It's a resource. It's a tool that we use for common trade. And it's part of the social evolution of human evolution. That's where we are, right? So there has to be an abundance of it in order for it to exist. And in order for there to be 7.5 billion people on the planet. So the idea is, if you understand how to think about money and you understand how to resource money, there's no limit to the amount of money that you can make. And then I'll use examples, right? So, and this is where people get really agitated, but it causes them to think. And I'll say, how smart do you think criminals are? How smart do you think people in jail cells are? And the average person would basically tell you that for the most part, they don't think those people are very intelligent. Well, how is it that they can figure out how to get these resources, including money? And some of them are extraordinarily wealthy. And then I've got one more thing for you. I have met people that are homeless that have more money than people that are struggling. How do they get money, right? And it's like you could see the wheel turn in their mind where they go, I don't like that answer, but it's true. How is that true? How is that actually true? If you look at people that are in a 9x11 jail cell and they're there for life, the amount of resources that they can get in that jail cell is extraordinary. There's many documentaries that show all the different things that people in jail cells figure out how to do. And they can basically get anything that's on the outside in that cell. They can communicate with people and they're literally in solitary confinement. They figure out how to communicate with other prisoners. And the reason for this is because anything is possible if you know how to think according to the laws of the universe. And there's 7 basic laws in the universe. Once you understand how to think according to those laws are always pointing you to the truth about the world that we live in and not the paradigm that you've been trained to think by your entire life. So that's how.
Wow. I mean, just even take that visual of being in a jail cell, solitary confinement. And it's true. You see every movie and how Hollywood will show you the way of all of it. And what I love about what you said, so how you think about money and how you find it. And one definition I heard of money at one point was, and I love your perspective on this, that money's just energy.
That's all it is. It's just energy. But basically it's an idea, right? When you think about money, it's an idea. It has, when you hold up a bunch of, like a couple $100, all it is paper with dead presidents printed on it. What is the value of it? The value is based on what it's worth to the person you're trading for. That's it. So especially when it comes to sales, and we teach people how to make extraordinary sales, part of the idea is that you get the other person to buy into the value of the result that they want. And you stop telling them about what you can do for them, right? If you can get them to buy into the value that they want, and they have the urgency to do whatever it is that they need to do, they'll pay you whatever it takes to get that value. But most people don't sell that way. All they do is sell by telling people what they can do, what they have. It puts people on the defensive, and they never actually focus on really computing the value in their own mind of whatever the result is that they're looking for in life. Once a person sees that result, they will pay extraordinary amounts of money in order to get it.
Mm. Yeah, I know that to be true. I know many of your students that come out and they're just like doubling their fees and what have you. And it's not about like, okay, you could double your fees or you can increase your fees or what have you, but it's what they have in their bones, in their blood, because they own it and they know the value that they're creating. So their ability to communicate it is what I've noticed in many of the students that you've worked with that I'm near and dear friends with. They're unapologetic about it.
Exactly. Because they know their own worth.
Yes.
I mean, that's one of the things that we work with. Most people are raised, we are raised with a really weird thing. And that is there's this dual idea about money. It's almost like the necessary evil that we have to have in our mind. And it goes like we see it everywhere, including in religions, like money's okay, to live by, but don't get hung up on it or don't have too much. And it gets misconstrued based on all different kinds of spiritual teachings. We live in a society that loves to celebrate the celebrity and the person that wins until they make a mistake. And then we can't wait to just rip a strip off of them and just tear them down to the basis. And we literally learn a dual lesson. You need it, but you have to be careful because it will destroy you. And basically, money is a magnifier, like a lot of things, right? Like COVID's been a magnifier for a lot of things. We're finding out a lot of stuff that we really didn't know about a lot of different countries based on what's happening. But money, what it does is it magnifies who you really are at the core of yourself. My mentor used to say, listen, if you're an asshole, it'll make you more of an asshole. If you're a nice person, it'll make you more of a nice person. It doesn't actually change people. It brings out more of who they are. And I have found that to be 100% true.
Oh, well said. Well said. Tell us a little bit about about what our listeners about the Art of Success, because I know that was my first live experience with you, and it transformed everything and I'll just tell this quick story real quick. I remember we're there, people are going up to the microphone and talking about some of their limiting beliefs and things of that nature. And I might butcher this and you might remember it, but I'll try to get the essence of it. So people standing up to the microphone or what have you, and one guy being like, I don't get it. I don't have any limiting beliefs. I grew up in a really great family, really perfect family, the sweetest, nicest man in the world, and what have you. And in milliseconds, you pointed it that, like what's got him stuck and what his limiting belief is worry that he got from his mother, because his mother was constantly worried. And I remember just seeing, this guy was very introvert, stood up at the microphone, quiet, what have you. And he was really, truly being genuine. He wasn't trying to challenge you. He was like, I ain't got nothing. I grew up in the most amazing, beautiful home. My parents were loving. They were kind. They were what have you. And as soon as you were like nailed it, and truly, he said a couple of sentences describing his family and you nailed it. And I just saw the life force come through this guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. So let me tell you a little bit about how the Art of Success works. It's broken down into 3 days, and we learned 3 basic things that allow a person to begin the fundamentals of changing everything in their life. The first day is about the psychology. And let me tell you a little bit. So like, I did not go to university or college, right?
Me neither.
So I studied psychology with some of the most amazing people in the world that literally had pulled away from the way traditional psychology is taught because of the limitations. And the things that they taught me about psychology are mind-blowing once you know them. And they're the stuff that's very easy to use. So the first day we learn about the human being, psychology, and a bit about energy or spiritual concepts, which are also basic laws. And when I talk about the 7 laws of the universe, it's one of the things that actually bridges science and religion, because those 7 laws not only exist in every major religion on the planet, they exist through all of science, right? And most people don't recognize that because they're worded different ways depending on whether you're talking to a scientist or a doctor or a professor, or you're talking to somebody who's, say, a priest or a nun or something like that. So the first day we go through that. So you really begin to understand yourself and how your paradigm is controlling your behavior and controlling what you see in the world. The second day is understanding how those 7 laws work as they pertain to you, how you think, and how they control not only what you see, but what you have the ability to resource. And then the third day is a very personal strategy based on where you are and what it is that you actually want to change in your life. So we help people work on a strategy so when they leave, they know exactly what it is they have to work on and what psychology piece they need to work on and where they need to work on those laws as far as how they actually think. The foundation of most human beings around the world, the thought process, is all about how to be safe, how not to risk so much, and how not to screw your life up that bad.
Oh, my God.
So all the values that we get are about basically trying to stay the same, except that is contrary to the human spirit. That's contrary to the evolution, psychological evolution and biological evolution. But it's something that we're taught. And if you don't understand how that holds you back, you're literally making decisions from a place that have no way of actually moving you forward to the success that you want, and you don't even know it. This is why so many people struggle.
It's beautifully said. Perfect. Oh, my goodness. So tell us about when the next event is.
So it's April 25th through the 27th in Atlanta. And if they want to find out more, you're going to put a link in this. They can
absolutely. Yes. The Art of Success Summit. Listen, I'm here on the website right now and I'm seeing this, that you can add an extra ticket for only $147. So it's $394 for 2 people or $247 for one person. I'm going to tell you, first person that emails me, I'm going to take you as my guest.
Oh, that's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah. I told David, I'm going to bring my 20-year-old son too. So I'm going to allow for him to bring a guest as well. Cause can you imagine having a 20-year-old in here? But I want my listeners, for you all, I don't know about you, David, but what I'm hearing from my friends and colleagues, we're ready to get on a plane. We're done with Zoom rooms.
Yeah.
We want to get in the room. I want to get in the room.
We're in such a time of change. If you don't understand that you have to change the rules, you won't make it. I mean, you just won't make it because everything is changing so fast. But if you understand what to change, and how to think, not only can you make it, but this is a time where you can become extraordinarily successful in a short period of time. Every time we go through a crisis, whether it's in our country or in our world, it presents both opportunities. The opportunity to crash and burn, but also the opportunity to become extraordinarily successful. And the ones that become successful, the reason that they do is because they know how to think and recognize opportunity in what they're doing to become successful. And the part about it that's so hard to get people to realize is that the opportunity for them to accomplish whatever they want is right there, but they're not trained to see it. If you're not trained to see it, it might as well not even be there. And that's what we do. We train people how to see it, and then we teach them what to do with it once they do see it. But everybody has that opportunity. Every person on the planet has that opportunity. They just need to be taught how to see it.
Oh, mic drop. That is perfect. David, thank you so much for being our guest. I am a true believer. I'm a follower, and I am deeply, deeply grateful for stumbling upon your podcast many years ago and for all the work that you continue to do. And finally, that we have someone of your nature that's really supporting the legal community, because it's so necessary that, a lot of their conditioning, and this from attorneys, so I'm not being disrespectful, that they just feel they just can't see it. Like you said, they just feel so stuck because of all of that conditioning that they received in law school. I mean, think about it. This is what I hear from attorneys every day. Imagine if this is the number one thought that rolls around your head as you navigate your day and wakes you up at 2:00 in the morning in the pool of sweat, malpractice. Like if that's like what you're constantly have, that 20,000-pound bag of shit, carrying that around every single day.
Exactly.
So yes. Okay, guys. All right. That's a wrap. David, thank you so much for continuing to be a leader leading leaders. And thank
Thanks,
you
Molly.
for being in the legal space. So it's David Neagle, Neagle, EAGLE.com. For those of you that are exercising, walking, driving, cooking, whatever you do when you listen to our podcast. And it's an Art of Success Summit. I'm not kidding, guys. First person that responds and says, take me, you're my 2-for-1, you're my guest. All right, that's a good stopping point for us. We've reached the end of yet another episode of Hiring and Empowering Solutions podcast, where dream teams of entrepreneurs in an entrepreneur's world really do come true. Listen, whether you're a business owner, executive, or responsible for hiring in your law firm, we fully understand hiring, onboarding, training, and leadership is very expensive, exhausting, overwhelming, and time-consuming for the already taxed professional. Well, we have your back on all fronts. For 25 years, we have transformed over 4,000 law firm teams into becoming the most efficient, resourceful, and profitable asset of your business. Check out our Smart Hire solution or the Employee Leadership Program and the 66-day law firm turnaround at hiringandempowering.com.